Since childhood, we're trained to chase approval. A smile from a parent, a nod from a teacher, the laughter of our peers. Every signal tells us, conform and you'll be accepted. But here's the trap. We start confusing approval with self-worth. We twist ourselves to fit expectations, and slowly we vanish. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the version of you built to survive in society. But the more you rely on it, the further you drift from who you really are. What doesn't fit that mask? You bury it into what Jung called the shadow. Your real thoughts, feelings, desires, locked away because they don't please others. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It festers. It becomes anxiety, resentment, depression. And Adler? He went deeper. He saw how this need for approval grows from insecurity, a haunting sense that you're not enough. So you chase status, praise, anything to feel whole. But real confidence, it has nothing to prove. It doesn't need applause. It comes when you stop performing and start. And the main truth, the moment you stop begging for approval is the moment you become unstoppable. So how do you break free? How do you stop living for approval and start living for yourself? It begins with one brutal question. Are your choices truly yours, or are they shaped by fear? Fear of judgment, fear of disappointing others, fear of being alone. Look closer. How much of you is real? And how much is just performance? Here's the truth. No matter what you do, someone will disapprove. But their opinion has nothing to do with your worth. The moment you stop chasing validation, you begin uncovering who you really are. At first, it's terrifying. You feel exposed. You fear rejection, abandonment, isolation. But here's the twist. The people you fear disappointing are just as afraid. They're hiding too, behind masks, behind expectations. Jung called the path back to yourself individuation. The process of reclaiming every lost part of your soul, your truth, your anger, your dreams, not to rebel, but to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. The hardest part? Facing the ancient fear of being cast out. Once exile meant death. Today it means freedom. You're no longer fighting for survival. But still, you act like being liked is life or death. Adler saw the trap. We measure ourselves by others, beauty, success, status. And when we don't measure up, we shrink. We call it humility. But it's self-erasure. You chase praise. You reach goals. You're applauded. But inside, still empty. Why? Because approval fades, fast. And when it's gone, so is your worth, if it was built on their applause. So flip the question, not, do they approve of me? But, do I? Not, am I enough for them? But, what does enough mean to me? Adler's answer? Live for something bigger than approval. Growth, purpose, integrity. Confidence doesn't scream. It's quiet, rooted. It comes from knowing who you are, even when no one's clapping. Want to be free? Care about connection to a sub, but never depend on it. Listen, but never obey. That's the shift. That's when you stop performing and start living. You can appreciate validation, but you don't need it. That's freedom. But getting there, it means rewiring a lifetime of lies. You were trained to seek approval, to believe your worth depends on being accepted. Breaking that takes practice and courage. Courage to face rejection and not flinch. But here's what changes everything. The more real you become, the more real people you attract. No more performing, no more fragile confidence, just truth. And a quiet kind of power, the kind that whispers, I'm enough as I am. So ask yourself, who would you be without the need to prove anything? What have you buried just to avoid judgment? Because here's the trap. Most people never stop chasing approval. They keep reshaping, hiding, pretending, desperate to be liked. But the moment your worth depends on them, you hand them the keys to your happiness. And now, you're not living. You're imprisoned by their opinion. And the cage is invisible, but you can break it. Jung believed real self-discovery begins the moment you stop chasing approval and start searching for truth inside. But here's the danger. If you live only through your persona, the mask built for acceptance, one day it cracks, and beneath it, a stranger. You built the perfect life, the job, the image, the applause. But deep down, you're hollow. Why? Because you followed the script, not your soul. This is the crisis Jung warned about, when success feels like a lie because it was never truly yours. Adler echoed this. He called it the striving for superiority, a toxic chase to outshine, outperform, outprove. But his greatest insight, real confidence, doesn't come from being admired. It comes from no longer needing to be. So ask yourself, if status vanished, would you still feel worthy? If no one clapped, would you still stand tall? Freedom begins when you stop measuring and start defining, on your terms, for your truth, without the mask. This is where it gets real. If you want to stop seeking approval, you must be willing to disappoint. Not everyone will get you. Not everyone will like you. And that's the point. Every visionary, every rebel, every game changer faced rejection, not because they were wrong, but because they stopped asking for permission. So ask yourself, how often do you hold back just to stay liked? How many dreams have you delayed out of fear of judgment? The shift begins here. Stop asking, do they like me? Start asking, do I? Become the person you admire, respect, trust. Rejection, it's not failure. It's evidence you're finally being real. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes work. But the more you choose truth over approval, the lighter you become. And one day, without even noticing, you'll stop performing. You'll stop proving. You'll just be. And now, the final truth. The need for approval, an illusion. A story you were told as a child and believed without question. But it was never real. And now, you don't have to believe it anymore. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's the trap of approval. You think it's just who you are, but it's not. It's a habit, a pattern, one you can break. Now imagine this. You wake up tomorrow, and you don't care who approves. You speak, act, choose, freely, not to impress, but to express. Would it feel terrifying? Or finally, free? Most fear that freedom. They think it leads to isolation. But the truth? When you stop pleasing everyone, you start attracting the ones who matter. And, more importantly, you reconnect with yourself. Adler knew this too. Real belonging doesn't come from being liked. It comes from the strength to stand alone, because constant validation isn't connection, it's performance. True connection begins when the mask drops, when you show up, raw, real, unfiltered. That's when everything shifts. When you stop chasing approval, you become untouchable. Rejection can't shake you, criticism can't break you, and no opinion can tell you who you are. You'll still care, you'll still love. But you'll no longer need to be liked to feel worthy. That's the power you've had all along. Now, it's yours. Think about the people who truly inspire you. Are they the ones who played it safe, who lived for approval? Or are they the ones who stood alone, who spoke their truth, even when it shook the room? Now ask yourself, who do you want to be? Will you hide in the shadow of opinions or step into the light of your own truth? This is your moment. The second you stop chasing approval, you reclaim your freedom. You become who you were always meant to be. So I'll leave you with one final question. Are you ready? Ready to let go of the need to be liked and start living on your own terms? Because the life you want, the one that feels like home, begins the moment you decide you are enough, exactly as you are.